up, guys? Lane and Trish here, and welcome to our podcast, Making Moves with Lane and Trish.
Hey, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic week. Things have been exciting lately.
It's Fiesta Week.
Fiesta Week here in San Antonio. Actually, Fiesta's about 2 weeks now.
Weeks,
here
yeah.
It's San Antonio's biggest party of the year. So for those of y'all who've ever gotten to attend, you know it's a pretty big deal around here in San Antonio. It's been hard not to get out and want to go to parties every day, though.
Yeah, it's really difficult this time of year.
Yeah, and that brings us to our topic today, which is staying focused on long-term goals.
Well, yeah, a lot of times we seek short-term pleasure, and usually that's going to equal long-term pain. And I think a lot of times that we tend to, be able to focus on immediate threats. If there's something immediately going to, threaten our lives or our business or our family, that we can respond to it pretty quickly because it's an obvious threat. But if it's something that's long-term, a lot of times we don't necessarily see it as a sort of an impending threat, and we'll tend to put that off and put that off and put that off. And then eventually, the future comes and, we have this huge thing that, problem that we have to face because we were continuing to put that off.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, people have two basic categories of habits: instant pleasure and delayed. And everyone has things they do that fall into both of those, and you've really got to find a balance to where you still are allowing yourself to do some things that have instant gratification, and those are things like social media, watching TV shows, playing with a pet, something like that.
Absolutely.
That does provide an instant gratification, but we have to make sure that we're not giving up so much of what we want long term to simply fill our lives and our days in each moment with something that's going to provide us gratification right at that moment.
Well, I think it's that microwave mentality that everybody talks about. We live in a society now where everybody's used to getting exactly what they want when they want it. And it's kind of like with social media or microwave food or just anything in life these days. I mean, you get everything pretty quickly, and we're not used to putting off and delaying gratification. And at the end of the day, though, the good life really doesn't come from instant gratification.
Yeah, and the thing with short-term gratification is it wears off pretty quickly. What it does is it also creates a void when it does that, and it constantly leaves you wanting more and more and more, and you get to a point where you never feel satisfied. And the more you can focus on what your long-term goals are and really take each opportunity that comes up in your life to go, is this something that's going to really be an investment in my future best self, or is this simply something that's just going to make me temporarily happy? And we've got to break it down. There's 6 major areas that your goals fall into in life, and you've got to really break each one down and figure out the things that you should be doing to reach long-term success and long-term happiness within each of those. And you've got your career, you've got health and fitness, fun, learning, financial, and giving. And within each of those categories, you've got to have separate goals. You've got to plan out long-term goals, everything from weekly to monthly to yearly to way down the road and even past your own life. It's one of those things you've got to think generationally and way past even where you're going to be. What are you going to leave behind? And really look at each choice you make and figure out whether or not it's going to move closer to those long-term goals or simply delay getting there altogether.
Speaking of thinking generationally, there's a thing called transgenerational thinking. And basically it kind of talks about, it was a TED Talk I listened to the other day. We listened to a lot of TED Talks. And it talks about like how people from previous, way back in the day, people like Plato and Copernicus, those people, they thought, they didn't just think in terms of from birth to death. These days we tend to think of how we can help the world or our impact just being from birth to death. But they looked at things completely multi-generational. They would start something that they knew would never, the end of it would be, a long time away, and they would never see the end of it. But just that way of thinking and how it kind of contrasts with, the short-term thinking of today. And it used to not be this way, where everybody expected instant gratification. And so I think we're dealing with a societal issue definitely going forward, to where we're definitely going to have to do something about it.
Well, I think there's a lot of different things too that you can do within your own life to condition yourself to be focused more on the long term and on long-term happiness. And I think we get so wrapped up in everything mainstream these days, and mainstream media, and that stuff is so...
Oh, the media is just garbage.
Yeah, it's put out there to really, really draw you in, and it literally sucks you in and fills your brain and your mind and your thoughts and eventually your actions and your patterns with negativity. And you've got to figure out a way to eliminate as much of that in your life as you can. I know with us, where are we now? We are just over 14 weeks since we officially cut the cable off in our house. And I guess 13 week we turned it off, electively did not turn it on for a week, and 1 week after that we actually called the cable company and discontinued service.
I'll tell you what, it's been awesome.
Yeah, it's been incredible, the change that I have felt mentally by not having it on even in the background. Even if we wouldn't be watching a show, and focusing on it, having that negative news in the background or having that mindless content out there and just filling your brain, it really does take a toll on you. And I think, just like I mentioned before, where it leads you wanting more, you're constantly trying to fill this gap and this void. If you're putting that kind of information and content in there, and you never really get to the point where you're able to even focus on the long term in the future, because there's so much happening around you right now, or that's what they want you to think.
Well, most media is designed to evoke an emotional response, whether that's good, positive, or negative, and it's meant to sort of pull you into a thinking, like a habit loop, to where you're watching it over and over, and you're just dwelling on whatever it is that they're talking about, and it becomes part of who you are over time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything else. It's addictive, and it's in its very nature, the way it's created to be addictive for you, so that you want to keep coming back to it for more and more. And that's how they get loyal viewership on their channel, and that's how they can charge advertisers a lot to reach you on their channel and all of that. So it's definitely something that more people should try to get less of in life.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you go on the news channels and you get your fix, so to speak, over time. And you're gonna be able to tune into the news channel that is going to be in alignment with what you think you believe, and you eventually start to become addicted to it. And this short-term thinking, this quick fix, quick pleasure now, and not worry about the future kind of thing it's a big problem. I mean, if you think about in that TED Talk I was talking about earlier, they were talking about how, it can cause a CEO to put off, doing safety testing or something on one of their products, and cause a major, issue or problem.
Well, yeah, they don't want to spend a little bit of money now, because that might hurt just a little bit right now.
Right.
And they avoid doing something that in the long run really, really can be detrimental.
Well, they're even talking about, Congress initiating a bill that would fix highways, and then you have a major bridge collapse or something like that. And so, the list goes on, but you can see that, our society is really moving towards, just the quick fix and saving money and not worrying about the long term.
Yeah, I think you can look at it on an entire societal level. You can look at it on a personal level. All of us are so much more driven by how we feel right now than the ability to even contemplate how we might feel in the future. And that's why you see so many people without enough savings, because they'd rather spend the money now and get the gratification that they temporarily get from that. And they will greatly diminish the quality of life that they could have in the future, and that their family could have in the future, and that generations past them could have in the future. And so I think it's so important to look at choices you make in your career, choices you make in your daily life, and go, how can I make a change now? And yeah, it might be uncomfortable, it might not be fun, it might take away from some of what you want to enjoy right now, but it will very likely be a step in the right direction to really, really changing your future for yourself and your family and in generations.
Well, I know in business we see it all the time where you'll have brand new agents come in and they want the instant gratification. They want to be making tons of money, all at once. And I think Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, he talks about that a lot. And he talks about how in business you really have to keep the future in mind. You really have to think long term. And he has that book out. What's it called? Jab, 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 right hook. And it's exactly this. It's you've got to provide tons and tons of value at a lot of times at no cost for an extended period of time before you can go in sort of for the kill and ask for the business. And so many people these days just go straight for the the right hook and the right hook over and over again and ask for business, and they're not providing enough value. They're not relevant. And I remember in one of the scenarios he was talking about, if in a fight situation, jab, 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 right hook. Well, if you're doing nothing but right hooks, you're teaching your opponent or your customer or your client how to, what do you do in that situation? You duck. And that's what a lot of people do when you're just, not providing any value and you're asking for business nonstop.
They avoid you.
They avoid you. Yeah. They avoid you, which is,
And ultimately, you burn bridges that way. And
absolutely.
If you're not coming from a place of providing value all the time and long-term value, not just instant value, it goes both ways. What you provide needs to be focused on the long term for those around you. But you've really got to understand that the more you can build relationships and provide value and get into what will actually change a life as opposed to changing just a moment, it's going to change everything in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what Robert Kiyosaki said. He said, remember to dream big, think long term, underachieve on a daily basis, and take baby steps. That is the only key to long-term success. And I think that's so interesting that he would say that, just because we live in a society now where everybody tells you to just overachieve all day long, every day, work. And the key to actual long-term success, although it may seem counterintuitive, is actually just to take those baby steps every day.
I couldn't agree more. And I think we hit a lot too on happiness with this. And obviously a lot of what everyone's searching for in life is happiness. And I think we could get an entire topic out on that, on creating long-term happiness, because it's different than just success. There's things you put in place, and there's ways that you look at what you do now, and obviously what we're talking about with investing in your future best self. And I always use the phrase, do something today that your future self will thank you for.
Yes.
I've used that a million times, and
I love that saying.
I think it's big. I truly believe that. So it's with everything you do. You don't see instant results when you go to the gym. You don't see instant results when you start building a business and you start putting forth the effort and you start making sacrifices for what you want. And another saying that comes to mind when I think of the sacrifices is that if you don't sacrifice for what you want becomes the sacrifice. So we could get in fact, you know what? I'm just going to vote right now. Our very next podcast should be all about creating long-term happiness through relationships.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Great topic. A really good way to kind of get your long-term thoughts, up and visual is through dream boards. And I know we've used one for years, and it's just an awesome way to kind of like put stuff up there that, you might, where you're going to be at in, a long time. So
yeah, I think you've got to have a visual. It's got to be up in front of you. It's got to be somewhere that you're going to see it on a daily basis, because you've got to have that constant reminder of what you're working towards and what those long-term goals are, because it is very, very easy to get distracted by a short-term pleasure that may present itself to you out of nowhere, and you want to take advantage of it, or you want to experience it, even though it may take you farther away from where you want to go. So if you've got that constant reminder up in front of you, those goals, those dreams, that vision board, I think you're just able to attack your day way more strategically and say no when you need to say no. Focus on the long term.
Looking at our dream board right now. I think we need to update it a little bit.
Yeah, we're working on updating our dream board. So
yeah, well, it changes
It does change, and I think it's important.
Few months.
that you also pay attention to when your goals or your dreams or your wants, when they do change some. So as you go through life, things can happen and you may change slightly what it is you want, or you may realize your why is something a little bit more different as you grow into your relationships and as you create new relationships and new bonds with people, and life in general changes. So it's one thing you always want to update your vision board when you can.
And there was a really, really interesting study, really the only study of its kind ever done. I think it was done in 1938. It was a Harvard study. And they interviewed over a 75-year period, 75 years at the time. It was actually an ongoing study. But they interviewed a whole bunch of men from all different walks of life.
I think it was like 600 or 700 men, yeah.
Yeah, they interviewed 600 men or 700 men from all different walks of life. Some of them were Harvard men. Some of them were from the roughest neighborhoods in Boston. And they tracked them and tracked their health and tracked their lives and what they did and their families for all these years. And so a lot of them are actually still alive and in their 90s. I think it was 60 or 65 are still actually alive. And, what they found is that a lot of these men started out when they were younger saying that what they really wanted out of life was fame and fortune and all the things you hear, people say today when they're starting out. But over the course of their lifetimes, what they all came to the conclusion of was that relationships were the most important things. And then even further, the quality of those relationships. And so I thought it was quite interesting that, doesn't matter what walk of life, these people came from. Some of these people ended up very wealthy. Some of these people ended up very poor. Some of these people, actually, one of them became the President of the United States. I believe it was JFK. And, but all of them came up with one conclusive thing, and that's the quality of the relationships in their lives was the most important aspect, most important part of thinking about the long term and being happy.
Yeah, so I think we'll dig even deeper into that one on our next podcast, because I think we could talk about relationships for a very long time. In fact, we are gonna be celebrating 23 years together next week.
It's crazy.
That would make it appropriate that next week's topic is about relationships and long-term happiness. So I think the most important thing we can get out of this is that you've got to constantly stop yourself, think about what you're doing, remember your long-term goals, find ways to visualize them, have them in front of you, and make sure that each and every day you're doing things that are going to be investments in your long-term goals.
Well, and it gets easier. It's a long-term thinking is like a muscle. I mean, the more you use it, the better at long-term thinking you're going to get. And so it's just like anything else. It's like going to the gym or anything else like that. The more you do it, the better you'll get.
And that wraps up today's podcast. So we look forward to talking to you next week.
All right, guys, like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next podcast.